I'm going to, my report to a certain extent is a prelude to the discussion of the proposed budget for fiscal year 2015 next year. I thought it's always appropriate for us to let you know what your participation and your investment in CRL has produced during the current year and what we propose to do in the coming year. So the mission, as it's been since 1949, is to support advanced research and teaching in the humanities, sciences, and social sciences. The kind of research like the course that the Matt Johnson seminar at Grinnell that Richard Fife spoke about, and the big book, this recent biography of Gandhi that you may have heard about on NPR recently, is one of the dozens of big books that are produced every year using research materials from CRL, research materials that CRL has identified, collected, and brought together and made available. So we ensure the survival and the availability of critical source materials for research. That's essentially what CRL has done since 1949. Now, 65 years later, the mission seems to continue to be as relevant as it was in that time. Materials like the newspapers from Sarajevo during the Bosnian conflict in the 1990s that were preserved and preserved to microfilm by the Slavic and Eastern European interest group that works under the CRL umbrella. We do have a number of area studies working groups that are constantly at work identifying important and at-risk and valuable materials valuable for research purposes, and those interest groups identify the material, lay hands on the material, and work it through the microfilming and digitization system. And newspapers like this Kurdish newspaper, also, which is published by the Kurdish Party in Iraq during and after the Iraq War. The party that publishes this is actually the party founded by the current president of Iraq, Jalal Talabani. These are the kinds of materials that would normally kind of disappear. This particular one, the Iraqi newspapers were actually collected by University of California, Berkeley, but it was the Middle East Materials Project under the CRL umbrella that brought the material together, collated them, and reformatted them for preservation purposes. Just the kind of things we do. There are big challenges today that are facing your libraries as well as CRL, and we are realistic about those. Our eyes are fully open that there are a lot of local constraints, particularly with public universities where budget cutbacks have really eaten away at collection funds, and preservation funds. I think the preservation funds are the first to go, and collection funds soon follow. You know that also the things like cutbacks in federal funding, as well as anybody seen Paul Ryan's budget for the next governmental year, there's a lot of very important things that are disappearing, like the NEH, for instance. So, and these things will be fought back in the Congress, but only to a limited extent. There have been massive cuts in Department of Education budgets, particularly for area studies, Title VI funds, and funds to the TIC-VIA program that have tremendously scaled back or curtailed what the big research libraries, the individual research libraries have been able to do. Also, at the Library of Congress, there have been big cuts in the Library of Congress overseas operations. In fact, you can see in the dim background here of the slide, one of the newspapers that was that CRL, particularly the Cooperative Africana Materials Project, funded the shortfall at the Library of Congress Nairobi office to preserve these newspapers from East Africa. Every year for the past few years, we've been supporting actually providing money to shore up the Library of Congress program in that area to preserve important materials that they are just not able to do anymore. There are a lot of reasons why they aren't able to do this anymore, but it's something that we have been able to take up the slack on. The Cooperative Africana Materials Project also is one of those, is the project that David Easterbrook has did. Richard Fife mentioned has been a real champion for as many years as Africana librarian at Northwestern University. So The new challenges, other new challenges, growing interest in primary evidence. We have the bad things, which are the cuts and the curtailed resources, but the new good things are the big interest in primary source materials. There's a lot more use of important primary materials like newspapers, government documents, government archives, and humanities archives that undergraduates are using now. There's been a tremendous emphasis on original research by undergraduates, and so there's more strain on your special collections, I'm sure, and there's more demand for what we're doing. So it's a good thing, but it's an unfunded mandate in a lot of cases, as you know. And globalization of the curriculum. We had CRL and Duke University co-sponsored a conference on global studies, on international studies last year. It was held at Duke University with Mellon Foundation funding. Dan Hazen was one of the CRL board was one of the co-organizers of that. And one of the things that we learned at the forum at the conference was that the internationalization in a lot of higher education in the U.S. is happening in not so much in the humanities and social science, but it's happening in the business school, it's happening in the law school, it's happening in the engineering school, it's happening in health sciences. And so that's putting tremendous pressure on libraries to provide international material from different parts of the world, in the case of developing parts of the world, to support that growth. So it's not just the Beijing campus, it's the fact that the people in the business school are reading Chinese newspapers and looking at Chinese statistical abstracts, those kinds of things. This year at CRL, okay, to meet those challenges, the difficult, the bad ones, and the good ones, your libraries as members of CRL have stepped up. You are supporting a number of things happening at CRL that CRL is doing to help to provide support for international studies, to provide support for increased use of primary source materials by undergraduates. We've been ramping up our infrastructure for providing electronic access to primary source collections in particular. The law and government publications, we've been digitizing those intensively, working with the Law Library Microphone Consortium. This year, we've been continued to work through digitization of all the state legislative journals, the U.S. state legislative journals that are in the CRL collection. Those are going online rapidly in the LLMC digital database, to which your libraries, your scholars at your university, your libraries have access to. Last year, we did the Canadian legislative journals, entirely digitized the entire collection. That's now up on the LLMC. News we've been in news, we've been working with the British Library on a plan for digitization, as Mr. Pike reported, of African, Middle East, Latin American, South Asian newspapers in the British Library collection. Aside from the collections available at CRL and its CRL members institutions of international newspapers, the British Library is really it. We thought it was very important to bring that collection into the World Newspaper Archive, and it looks like we'll be doing that. We have a number of institutions that CRL libraries have stepped up and have committed funds to support digitization of those materials. And those institutions are many of the big ones like Princeton and University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign, and Harvard University. And so that's going to get done. Area studies, we are investing more every year. This year, the first year, I think we put about $50,000. We committed that to digitization of area studies materials, and that those decisions on which area studies materials are made by our interest groups, made by the Cooperative Africana Materials Project, by the Latin American Materials Project, South Asian, and Middle Eastern. We thought that it would be good for us to invest in digitization of these materials for CRL libraries, and that we decided to go with the fast runners, the interest groups that work the hardest and to get things done. So we provided seed funding this year. Science, technology, and engineering. We have brought online the Linda Hall Library's collection of 40-some thousand science, technology, and engineering journals for access by CRL, CRL libraries. We're seeing a lot of use of those. Some of the big users are some of the big universities like Penn State and University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign, where there's some puzzling small users, institutions that we think really would benefit, that researchers in their institutions would benefit by this. And we're working to figure out how to get them more tied in, more active on this. But those collections are available through document delivery. And actually, we're doing as much document delivery from Linda Hall Library now as from CRL Central Repository. So that's worked well. In addition to the document delivery from Linda Hall, there's the area studies project, but there's also the CRL project, which Richard mentioned, which is intensely digitizing U.S. government-produced technical reports. One of these is on the commit system memory, for the explosive mixtures, which were the subject of this investigation, et cetera, et cetera. But one of the tens of thousands of documents that think are being put online every year by the CRL project working under the CRL umbrella. So it's getting done. We are supporting member library investment in e-resources. Aside from making collections available, we've begun negotiations with a number of the larger vendors on terms of access, terms of purchase, terms of subscription to large humanities and social science databases, with particular emphasis on news and government-produced information and financial information, those kinds of top demographics, statistical information, those kinds of things. The kinds of things that a lot of consortia don't focus on, focus more on the journals. We really don't do negotiations for journals, but we're doing more in the way of that this year. In the New York Times National or Academic Site License was one of the arrangements that CRL brokered this year. We feel that it's important that libraries, in dealing with these vendors, act collectively. And so we have stepped up to work on our members' behalf to ensure that the terms of access, terms of purchase for these materials are favorable, but also that there's due archiving and preservation done well at the same time. It doesn't make much sense to bargain down to the lowest price for a big database if the database, the integrity of the content of the database isn't there, or if there's not a commitment to long-term persistence of that database. So we're doing a fair amount of work. We are able to bring online an online workspace for member participation in the licensing. And this is e-Desiderata, came online in September 13th. e-Desiderata is a platform. It's a Drupal-based platform, content management platform that holds a tremendous amount of information about databases, about major databases, many of which we're in negotiation for or have negotiated terms of purchase for, that kind of thing. We worked with the Joint Information Systems Committee, DISC, in the UK, which is the national site licensing operation in the UK, to help populate the database in the beginning, and with information, their information about databases they subscribe to. That list has now grown tremendously since we first populated this. This was an online theater of war, so to speak, during the negotiations and during the discussions of the New York Times license. For instance, we were worried when we put up this that we wouldn't get enough participation, that people wouldn't comment, but we got plenty of comments on the New York Times license. It's a problematic license, I agree, and we're working hard to make it better. But this is really what e-Desiderata is an online workspace for community participation in decisions about licensing, in sharing information about licenses and sharing information about databases, those kinds of things. So we're pleased with it. This year, what has come online just about a month ago is a piece of this, which is more kind of a social media piece where you can go and where people at your institution, your collective development people, your research people can register to keep tabs on the discussion or keep tabs on new resources that are put up here, new databases that we've announced offers for. you have to be alerted about deadlines for deciding and signing on to databases. Signing off the databases, we've kind of cleverly called that media zero. It was a bad idea of somebody, the administration of CRL, but I think that there's no other media zero out there. I'm not sure if that's good or bad. And then Leviathan, the forum that begins this afternoon, which is about government information. This is all about what do we do as research libraries? What's our role as research libraries if all government information is paperless? If it's all born digital, if it's all posted on YouTube, or if it's all on Twitter, if it's all in proprietary email systems, if it's all in proprietary document management systems, those kinds of things. What's the, do we have a role in ensuring that those very ephemeral, very fugitive, very fragile records and evidence of government activities and government information are so fugitive, essentially? Do we have a role in ensuring the long-term integrity of those? So this year at CRL, it is this year, they're still in this year at CRL, support for member library decisions on collections. On collections, particularly print archiving, we brought online the paper registry of print archive programs, which has information on issue-level information on the print archives that are being done by various institutions and consortia in the U.S. Also, the holdings of the large digital repositories like Block and Portico. We think that if you're making decisions, your libraries are making decisions about withdrawing collections from service, moving them off campus, disposing of them, that kind of thing, you're really going to want to know a little bit more about the print archiving programs than its print archiving program. In some cases, as time goes on, as these materials have less redundancy as a result of withdrawing collections, that you're going to want more granular information about what actually is being preserved, not just has anybody checked if all the issues are there, or is it just we kind of walk down the aisle and look at the spine of the book? As if a particular archiving program has committed to keeping copies of particular titles, how long do they commit to doing that for? Are they committing to servicing them if they need to be served? What's their business continuity plan if they're going to address eventualities of changes in the minds or the interests or the priorities of the members, those kinds of things. So the paper registry is up and running, and that's getting more granular and more data being put in there as time goes on. I think we're planning to list CIC information this year, CIC serial. Also, we brought online, I don't know if the slide board is the International Coalition of Newspapers database, which is information about data which is data about the preservation of newspapers, particularly the international newspapers. Who's preserving them in microfilm, who's preserving them in paper, who's digitized them. And that is now the largest repository of information about newspaper preservation anywhere. And so that's what we've done. So next year at CRL, fiscal year 2015, and you'll hear more, this is where the budget impact is. We're going to increase investment in a number of things. It's extremely important, I think, now that we've generated reserves over the course of several years. You'll hear how the investment funds at CRL have increased over the last couple of years as a result of good investment and a result of surpluses in operating over the last 4 years. So we are going to be drawing on reserve to do a number of things. One, ramp up our digitization of collections, double the output of our digitization we do on demand for researchers. And that's been a tremendously successful program. This year, we've put in place the infrastructure to handle much more digital content at scale. The World Newspaper Archives project will be moving ahead with the British Library, thanks to investment by a number of commitment of investment by a number of CRL libraries. That'll bring a lot more news content online. The area projects, the area studies projects will be funding, again, providing funding for digitization of those. And there are work being done that we funded this year in Uganda by the African project. Agricultural periodicals, we were funding the digitization of historical agricultural periodicals by libraries out there, most of them land grant institutions. The funding goes towards digitization of those materials, putting those in open access on the web, and also committing to holding on to the paper that's digitized. So this is a combination of digitization. So news, law and government information through the Law Libraries Consortium partnership, and agriculture information through the partnership with U.S. Agriculture Information Network. So operating on those four focus areas that we declared a couple of years ago, digitization of the collection. Licensing of e-resources, we are increasing with increased staffing in the accounting department and licensing to support the better and more efficient negotiations for digital resources, the digital databases, and particularly in the areas of news and legal and government-produced information, agriculture, and statistical, and that kind of thing. We're also, we brought into CRL as a program hosted by CRL this year, the NEURL, the Northeast Research Library Consortium. That's a separate consortium. It's not a 501c3. It's actually a program that was hosted by Yale University so very recently. The program is now based at CRL. It has its own separate budget, its own separate financial management. But we feel that what they do, essentially, if you're not familiar with NEURL, is they license, or they negotiate terms for the licensing of journals, online journals, and big databases. So there's a certain affinity with what CRL does. We brought NEURL to CRL because we think having them in the building will create some real synergies in our licensing program, with our licensing program. The pooling of expertise, the people drinking coffee together, that kind of thing. I think have great it's going to be great cross-fertilization. What it also is, though, is more leverage between CRL and NEURL. We have about 300 libraries, U.S., primarily U.S. and Canadian libraries, that can now speak as one voice to the publishers. And so we believe that in the long run, that will give us much more leverage with the publishers. The cooperative and strategic preservation. The grant that the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation awarded CRL in January of about $850,000 is to do two things. One is to build on the paper registry, the print archives registry, to do, as Richard said, analyze the overlaps and gaps in the big print archiving program and figure out where the gaps are, where the redundancies are, where the holes are, and bring the people that run those together and help and have them draw conclusions from the data on where to go next, what needs to go next. The second part of that is work in the area of newspaper preservation, news preservation. That's to bring the National Library, representatives of the National Libraries, including the British Library, Library of Congress, Europeana Library, and other large organizations that are digitizing newspapers, particularly non-U.S. newspapers, and CRL, bring them together with the vendors like ProQuest, Scale, and others, and look at the data about what's been preserved so far, where the gaps are, where the redundancies are, that kind of thing, and come up with a plan of action, or at least a gentleman's agreement on division of labor on where we digitize, going from there. So it enables us to take a leadership position in that, or at least a position that supports leadership where it emerges outside in the community. So that's those activities will be reflected in the budget that Treasurer Scott Law will present to you in a minute. I do want to close with just a couple of things say a couple of words just about what you have stepped up to do, what your organization stepped up to do in participating in CRL and in investing in CRL. I did talk about the concrete things that we've done, but there's also these larger kind of civic goods, that public goods that CRL generates and that your investment and participation generates. The CRL, a couple of years ago, we had a visit from the Attorney General of Brazil, And in Brazil, in the 1960s and 70s, there were secret military trials that rounded up and executed and tortured and disappeared a lot of Brazilian political opposition figures and activists. The Attorney General showed up at CRL because CRL apparently had the only copy of the transcripts of those secret military trials. Those were then borrowed by the government of Brazil and have now been digitized. 850,000 pages of that is on the web. And if you're good at Portuguese, you can peruse it. There's also, you can do the English version of the website as well. Similarly, I don't know if you've seen this film that came out recently on Muhammad Ali, but the researchers for the film spent a couple weeks at CRL going through what they found were the only copies of a lot of the Nation of Islam publications from the 1960s and 70s that are in the CRL collections. And this is really a remarkable film, and it does draw heavily on primary source resources. So you'll see those if you get a chance to watch it. PBS is airing it, by the way. I think it aired April 15th. So, but essentially, if we want to restate our mission, it's really today, in an age of paperless government information, in an age of where most things are digital, it's really about the long-term integrity and accessibility of critical evidence. That's really what your libraries are investing in and supporting, participating in when you're participating in CRL. So I thank you for participating in CRL, and glad you're here today. Thanks. We'll have now Scott Wall, the treasurer of CRL. We'll now talk in more concrete terms